very good morning to you. This is Doc and Rob with you here, as always, for a Sunday morning. It's 11:10 now. As per usual, we do like to have a guest in where possible, and this morning's guest is none other than Thanet District Councillor and the newest of the Thanet District Councillors, Karen Constantine. Welcome along this morning. Thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you for
and
inviting
having a chat.
me.
That's all right. Is this your first time ever on the radio?
No, it isn't.
No, it's not. I see.
Sorry.
So there we go. So, well, you're obviously the new. Well, I say new. You've been around for a while now. The ward councillor for Newington.
Yeah.
And how's that been for you since you've taken on that mantle?
I have to say I've really enjoyed it. It's sort of exceeded my expectations. I thought it was something that I could do and had some skills and ability to offer to the role, but having sort of started and got my teeth into it, I actually really enjoy it and I find it really extremely rewarding. And I suppose my only reservation is that I just, I'd like to do more and more all the time, because you can see that there's need and there's things that need to be, issues that need to be addressed, people that can be helped and situations that can be resolved. So I actually really, really enjoy it.
That's fantastic to hear. What made you decide you wanted to be a councillor? I mean, when did that switch come into you that said, I want to be doing something like this?
I'm not sure, actually. I suppose because I'm a trade union official.
Right.
So I suppose that instinct or that wanting to help or get situations sorted out has probably always been there. So I moved to Ramsgate a few years ago, and when the opportunity arose, I decided that I would go for it.
Fantastic stuff. Now, obviously, you go
bundle in with a few questions.
Bundle in with the sun, yeah.
Please do.
The reality is, councillors, lots of people out there will be going, and what do you do? So what is a councillor? What does a Thanet councillor do? Or a local ward councillor actually do? Because most of us just think, well, you probably just turn up to meetings, shout at each other and do what they do in Parliament.
Well, there's not much shouting, I can tell you that. I mean, what you try and do is you try to make yourself available to the residents in your particular ward. So you make yourself available. You may have phone calls from people. You may have emails from people. You deal with them on a day-to-day basis. You hold surgeries. So we hold roughly 2 surgeries per month in the Labour Party office on Newington Road. We're available for people. When somebody comes to us, we'd call that a case. We look at that situation and we see what we can do. So we're very much in the business of really trying to help people. And sometimes even when there's a situation and actually it's not strictly within your remit, there isn't really something you can actually do about it because the problem for this individual lies elsewhere, you can at least listen to that person. You can give them some support, a listening ear, and you can perhaps feed that issue into somewhere else. So say if it's a road and highways issues, we don't have a great deal of control there, but we can feed that into KCC. So as a council, you can sort of, if you like, you can kick that up to the next level and try and get something dealt with there. But it's really important to have people on the ground in these communities that are willing to help other people and build up skill and knowledge and try and share that, really.
Over the last few years, you've just become Newington's ward councillor.
Yeah.
What is your main thing? Because Newington is a depressed area.
Yeah, it is.
Probably best word to call it as a depressed area compared to other areas in Thanet.
Yeah.
And there are other areas of Thanet which are depressed. What is your main thing to get that turned around so it becomes more prosperous?
I think you're a bit limited as a district councillor in terms of really being able to be an engine for economic regeneration, but I think that's what we need in Thanet. So I think one of the things that would help people in Newington and other wards is if we had a better chance at economic regeneration. By that I mean more jobs, better skilled jobs, better paid jobs, because at the end of the day, it's the pound note in your pocket that actually gives you the wherewithal to climb out of a situation. So you say Newington is depressed. It's economically depressed. I wouldn't say that as an area it's a depressed area. It's actually quite a nice, lively and vibrant area. It's
unfortunately it's just outside of the Newington ward.
Yeah.
You go Newington, your brain suddenly goes dun, 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 and certain
It's the
stereotypical images
perception.
come up.
I guess it's the perception of things,
Yeah.
isn't it? I mean, as you say, there's lots of different things there. You know, you've got the Newington Big Local doing their stuff as
Yeah.
well, and they do a ton of stuff.
Absolutely.
You know, there is a community atmosphere around it, but it's just always had that stigma. Do you think that can ever be got rid of, that stigma, that kind of thing? Or is it just going to be one of those things like you know, Ramsgate people say Margate, and Margate people go Ramsgate, and then Broadstairs go, we're not fussed about either.
You've got
that
certain
kind of thing.
schools not mentioned, and we go, oh, that school, oh, that's a shoddy
Always
one. No.
difficult. Always difficult when an area has what can be said to be a poor reputation. It's always really difficult to turn that around. But I think it can be turned around. I think Newington probably is a much improved place, you know. And again, I'd go back to economic prosperity and economic regeneration, where you've got populations that are able to take care of themselves because they earn decent money. That's really what's going to make the difference. And you know, Newington it's a great estate. It reminds me of where I was born and where I grew up. So it's a big council estate in Stoke, and it had great properties, which Newington does have. It has great properties, nice big gardens, nice big green open spaces. So in many ways, it is a recipe for a really vibrant, thriving community. And I think when you go there, I think quite often it is. You know, it is a thriving place, and
There's
people are
certainly
trying
been a
to.
lot of regeneration in there, definitely, for
Yeah.
sure. I mean, how did you end up sort of doing what you do in terms of that? Because obviously you have a day job as well. How you say you're a union official?
Yeah.
Are you just working for the union, or do you have like a day job?
No,
as
I have a
such?
day
Is that-
job. That is my day. My
that
day
is what
job
you
is
do,
regional head for
Right.
the Royal College of Midwives. So I look
Oh,
after
right.
all the midwives in the south of England, down to Cornwall, across to Kent, up to Luton. So it's a big patch.
That's a pretty hefty job.
of England.
Big
yeah.
area.
Yeah, but you know, new technology is wonderful, isn't it? You can get
isn't
your
it?
emails everywhere,
Yeah,
so
unfortunately.
you know you're always contactable.
Another quick question, which on the councillor front, which is,
Yeah.
I'm just chucking the questions out that I hear from people saying, "Oh, councillors," same as and the same questions that MPs and every representative body gets, which is, do you get paid as a
We
councillor?
get an allowance. We get an allowance, which is a taxable allowance.
Because one of the big things that people kicked off with the expenses issues and all the rest of it is, you're just there to feather your own bed and make your own thing, make things better for yourself.
Well, I mean, I think people will take a view of. I think if you're a visible councillor, I think one of the things I try and do is post very regular on my Facebook page and on Facebook. So if I'm in a meeting, I will do a quick note and I will put that out there. So we had the Joint Transport Board this week. One of the issues that came up was road safety. I'm concerned about road safety. There were a few issues related to Newington that I raised, specifically the closure of the car park. It's not technically in the ward, but the closure of the car park at the old swimming baths means that kids are being dropped off on the brow of the hill. Now, I've been a parent myself. I am a parent. I know you get really busy and you've got to get your kids to the school, and quite often you've got kids in two schools. So I can see the temptation to drop your kids off on the brow of the hill. But obviously it's not a particularly safe thing to do.
It's not. It's a dangerous road, very dangerous road. And I remember back in around about, I think it was around about 89, 90, there were two people killed, not school children, but there were two people killed, albeit by a drunk driver, on the Newington Bridge.
Yeah.
Because it's that stretch of road where people like to go fast, whether they're drunk or not.
Yeah.
So it's, it is a bit of a strange one that they want to close, areas like that off to people.
Yeah.
I know it was meant to be the swimming pool car park and so forth, but it did serve a dual purpose. When you've got a school right opposite and a busy road, surely something's got to give, hasn't it?
In the original plans, as far as I understand, and bear in mind I wasn't completely involved, there was a plan to have an additional car parking space adjacent to the skateboard area, so that there would be some car parking there. That hasn't happened. I don't know why that hasn't happened. You perhaps need to ask their current administration
Right.
why that
Oh,
hasn't
we will.
happened.
The leader of the council will be
The
coming in
point here
soon.
is you try and fix the problems locally. So you say, look, we've got a school here, we've got a situation where there isn't parking. Parents are obviously going to be tempted to drop the kids off, etc. And of course, you'd urge them not to. But then there's an additional question which you raise with Kent County Council, which is, what about we look at 20 miles an hour speed restrictions around all our schools? And what about we take really seriously the safety of our young people on the road? I mean, I don't wish anybody to be hit by a car, but obviously the smaller you are, the more devastating that is actually going to be. So we should take that into consideration. So I see my role as a councillor both in dealing with the local issues, but also looking at what else can be done and referring them upwards. So it's a sort of, I take it very seriously, and I'd like to use all my skills and abilities to try and fix solutions and sort of look ahead and say, well, what else might happen?
Okay.
I do enjoy it.
See, that's part of the battle. Well, we will have some more questions for you shortly, and obviously we will talk to you a little bit about the EU referendum as well. I understand you're part of the sort of side of things.
Yes, I'm a definite in.
So
remaining.
we've got you to talk about some bits for being in. Next week we've got South Thanet MP Craig McKinley, who is I think quite well known for being out. And we'll,
do you want to rephrase that?
Behave. In the meantime, I think we'd better play some more music, and we'll do that, and then we'll catch up again with Karen Constantine, who's our guest this morning from Thanet District Council, Councillor Ward for Newington. Now, one of the things that we do have Karen in for today is to talk about the EU. Now, this is obviously something we discussed.
We've had a quick chat on this.
We've had a quick chat on this, absolutely. And, we think we've made up our own minds on this, but there are a lot of people who haven't. We've spoken about the fact that there's a lot of scaremongering on both sides of this that I think a lot of people are fed up with. And people, I think, just want the facts, but I'm not sure whether anyone really knows what's going on anymore.
Indeed, I think
has it turned into a panto?
As a person who believes in staying into Europe,
I do.
stay in, then give us the reason why us two, and anyone else who's listening who hasn't made up their mind, should stay in.
I think, for me, one of the things that's really important that doesn't actually get talked about a great deal is the idea that by being a member of the European Union, we've had peace in our times. And I think you shouldn't really underestimate the value of bringing your children up and coexisting in an area where there's peace, where war isn't a threat. And that really drives me, because one of the founding principles, Winston Churchill actually, when we came out of the Second World War, wanted this accord, which was actually drafted by UK lawyers, to have an accord across Europe to prevent the devastation that we saw in the Second World War. And really, when you reminisce or when you look back and you see the carnage that existed at that time, and the fact that Europe was riven by wars, 2 wars a year since about the 1400s, then don't underestimate peace in our time. I think that's actually really valuable and really important. But moving on from that, I think for me it's also about the economic impact, that actually by being part of the European Union, we trade better inside Europe, obviously, and we trade better across the world. I think that's a key fact. And what I think about the European Union, when I've sort of had that conversation with myself and friends, because I'm not just blindly going, we're going to remain in Europe and that's my position, but it's actually thinking about what is best for the country, what is best, say, for the people of Newington, what's in their best interest. But I suppose as a mother and a grandmother, what really drives me is what is best for my children and my grandchildren. So I'm very firmly in the Remain In campaign, and I think there's been so many benefits of staying in, and I think there is so many risks attached to leaving the EU. I think it's just really important, and I'm very heartened actually to see that there was a flurry of last-minute voters trying to register online, and I think the government did exactly the right thing, extending that deadline. So I think it's very important that people do get information and facts from both sides and make their own decision. I fear if we come out of the EU, what we'll end up with is an economic recession. And you've got to remember that we're already going through years of austerity. So that recession is going to hit the poorest even harder than they've currently been hit. And there are some very, very poor people around with very limited chances to climb out of that poverty. And the other thing that really concerns me is if we have an economic recession, we'll also have a social recession, because workers' rights, I mean, obviously I'm a trade unionist, so you know where I stand on workers' rights, but workers' rights will be severely eroded. And I could tell you tales about what happens currently. I mean, we've had all the information this week on Sports Direct, you know, terrible working conditions. My fear is that will just become a normal practice if workers don't have the floor of rights that they've currently got.
Okay. Let's break down some of what you said.
Good.
The first point which you came was you said it was British. Are you talking about the EU or are you talking about the Human Rights Convention? Because British lawyers did write the Human Rights Convention, but the actual coal and mining treaties were created in 1956, which were French, German, Netherlands, and the Benelux countries that came together. As to the peace, well, that could be argued quite easily to say that was NATO, which has been a main bedrock for peace. And there have been wars in Europe. We've had the whole of the Serbian situation. We've had Bosnia, where Britain has gone into war with countries. So there's still been wars.
Just underscores, really, that situation just underscores how valuable and fragile peace is. That actually, if you don't have nations coming together, then that is something that could easily happen. So the European Charter of Human Rights was Winston Churchill in 1948, and that was then firmed up again by the Human Rights Act, which was sometime in the 1990s.
But the EU referendum isn't actually about the European Convention, because the European Convention is separate.
But even so, I guess some of these things probably have a knock-on
the European Convention
surely.
has to be actually. The European Convention is actually separate
But
from the EU.
But
well,
also,
we wouldn't have a convention of human rights. We wouldn't have the Human Rights Act. So we'd have to renegotiate that Human Rights Act. The same way, at the same time, we'd have to renegotiate workers' rights. We'd have to renegotiate trade deals. So you've got the whole of the CBI, the Institute of Directors, the bankers. You've got all the major leaders financial leaders in the UK saying, please be careful about leaving the EU because it will create this economic recession. The World Trade Organization have come out this week and said it's going to be difficult to renegotiate these trade arrangements that we've got. And it will be difficult because it won't just take, it's not something that's going to happen overnight. It will take many years. The wheels turn very slowly. We will become a bit part player. There's no doubt about that in my mind. It will take us many years, possibly a decade, to renegotiate those treaties. Okay, we buy a lot of stuff from Europe, so that's great. So we imagine that Europe will continue to send goods to us. Of course they will. But imagine if we have an economic recession. We're very fragile in that respect. If we have another economic recession, where is people's money going to be in order to fund those purchases? They won't have the cash to fund those purchases. So it's very important that we maintain a trading relationship. And actually, being in Europe gives us access to the rest of the world club as well. And we're better. I think it's very difficult to sort of think about how long and how complex these trade agreements are to renegotiate, but it will take decades, and it'll be the ordinary person on the street who has to put their hands in their pocket to pay for the privilege of leaving the EU, and they will not like it. And it will be a detriment to them.
Well, I've got a question actually before we go into Rob's one. Is the fact that we talk about the average person on the street, and actually, I mean, there are clearly obviously two types at the moment: those that are in, those that are out. However, the thing, I don't know what you find around your ward area at the moment, because let's be frank, you took over from a UKIP councillor, so that would suggest to me that certainly there is a big feeling of an out issue perhaps in the Newington area. Is that still the case, or what's your feeling on that? Have you had much sort of interest in that side of things from your local ward? Because I mean, I know that there aren't as many UKIP councillors as there was when the election was on in 2015.
Well, not officially.
Well, maybe so. We won't go there. But it was Vince Munday who resigned, and then that caused the by-election, which you've won. Is there still that sort of mentality from people there, or have their views changed at all?
I think people are making their mind up. I think you're right. People are largely in or out. I think there are floating voters. I think there's floating voters in every election. I think they're very often they're women who weigh up the situation and make a decision closer to the day. So women have got a really significant role to play, I think, in this situation. One thing that I don't do is when I'm with a ward, a member of the public from the ward, or whether I'm on the phone from somebody from the ward, is I don't have a political conversation with them about their housing and then lead into what do you think about the EU and try and convince them on some point. I'm dealing with that issue. So most of my conversations really are about that, and they're largely non-political. But obviously, if somebody asks me about the European Union, I'm going to say what I've said. I think one of the issues you find in places like Thanet, where we're quite kind of remote and a little bit cut off to some extent, is you get what I would call an echo chamber, which is if you're in a community and everybody's saying, oh, we're for leaving or we're for remaining, that you then sort of tend to believe that that's what's commonly held across the country. But I travel a lot, so I'm all over like a rash, and people outside of Thanet have very different views, and even in some places where you think people would be more conservative with a small c, they're actually really considering this issue. So I think it's obviously a critical vote, but I think it's quite interesting because it is creating a need for people to pause and stop and think. So I think that's quite interesting. I think we'll remain in on the basis of the conversations that I have across the south of the country. I think we'll stay in.
Do you think things need to be looked at in Thanet, though, a little bit, in terms of, let's be honest, 5 years ago, the party of UKIP was not, anywhere near the strength that they are now.
Yeah.
5 years ago, you would never have ever considered that a UKIP candidate would have come in second in a
close second,
a very close second in the general election down here in Thanet. It's from being one way or the other. You've either had the Conservative candidate followed very closely by, the Labour one, or when Stephen Ladyman won, it was the other way round. It was always just those two. It always seemed to be a two-horse race, and then all of this has happened. Given the fact that the EU do a lot of subsidies and things like that, do you think that there's a lot of people in Thanet that haven't really quite got what the EU is about in those kind of terms at all?
That's kind of 2 or 3 questions in one, isn't it?
It is.
I mean, firstly about the rise of UKIP in Thanet and the rise of UKIP everywhere, and anywhere, is sometimes these political parties do come and go. I mean, UKIP, to my mind, trade on fear. They trade on fear. They trade on this idea that somebody out there is ready there to take your house and your job. That's not the situation at all. We have a crisis with housing. We have a crisis with employment in Thanet. We need both housing and we need both jobs. It's going to be hard work to fix that problem. I personally believe only a Labour administration can fix that problem by investing in public services and helping to grow our area. I think one of the reasons that UKIP can take a hold, or one of the reasons that people get afraid of situations, is when people are very poor, when they can't see any prospects for themselves, and actually much worse than that, they can't see any prospects for their own kids. I think that's a terrible situation to be in, and I think being in the European Union actually enhances prospects. I mean, we stand to lose so much by coming out of the EU and literally being in a no man's land and not really understanding what comes next, how we renegotiate, what the impact is. And I would just say again, it'll be the ordinary person in the street that pays the price, literally pays for the renegotiations of trade agreements, etc. We'll be worse off.
Okay, well, we'll take a break from that and play some more music, and then we'll come back for some more chit-chat with Karen Constantine, Karen Constantine is the ward councillor for Newington for Thanet District Council, and she joins us this morning. If perhaps you've just joined us and you're thinking, hang on a minute, where's the other side of the argument? South Thanet MP Craig McKinley will be here next Sunday to talk about the Brexit side of things, as it were. And in the meantime, we'll play this from Love Affair, Everlasting Love.
That is better music mix. 107.8 AcademyFM.
Windy nearly there with, we finish at midday and Horace is here from 12. And we are joined today by Karen Constantine, who is the ward councillor for Thanet District Council for Newington Ward. And thanks again for coming in. We know you do this a little bit of short notice as well, so we do appreciate you coming in.
Thank you.
And obviously, we have Craig coming in next week. We'll be giving him a grilling as well. So, you know, it is all fair in love and war and that. And Rob, have you got any more questions?
From your beginning piece, where you set out why you think you should and people should vote to stay in, one of the points which was austerity and what happens with the downturn. Because I think most people, even if you're for or against, I think most people agree there will be some form of economic shock or readjustment. The question mark will be, I think, between the different sides is how big that shock will be. In terms of economics and downturn, and you know, it'll either be very sharp depression, recession, or as many people who are for in say will happen if you leave, and others who say, well, actually there'll be no difference, or it will only be a shallow one. Now, the difference is the European Union, depending on your different where we pay £350 million a week / net £270 million a week to the European Union. Well, that's money which we could better spend ourselves. In fact, if you add over the last 10 years, £40 billion, for which we've had back maybe, let's say, half of that through the rebates and also through grants, etc. Well, that pays for all the austerity which the government had to do. So if that money had actually not been paid to the European Union, we could have kept that ourselves, not had the cuts. We had make sure that shore services, NHS are looked after, people who are on benefits were looked after. We wouldn't have been so badly hit by the global recession came through. And if we keep giving £360 million, 270, whichever way you want to go with that one view, net or gross, that's better figures we could keep ourselves, surely.
Well, first of all, my starting point on this is I think it is outrageous that you've got the Leave campaigners, Boris and co, roaming around the country in that bus with that lie on the side, which is that money could be put into the NHS. That's simply not true. In terms of dealing with economic austerity...
Is it true, though, that we hand £360 million to the European Union every week? Whether that gets spent in different things, but we do pay that money too. A lot of it comes back. A lot of the precept that we pay actually comes back to us. So that's firstly true. So the
it's
net figure would be 270.
But it's completely misleading. I mean, let's get to the heart of this, which is the message to Leave is being based on completely misleading information that's being given to the public. So all the public has seen is this headline figure, and then there's a load of fear being whipped up, which is actually if we continue to stay in the EU, the NHS will continue to fail. Well, let's just look at that. The truth is that it costs 26 pence per day per person to be in the European Union. You've got to look at the net benefits. You've got to look at what we gain from that. You've got to look at the rights that we derive from remaining inside the European Union, and then look at the cost of what it will mean if we come out of the European Union, which is the chaos, which is further economic austerity, which is already impacting people really hard. I tell you that as a ward councillor, I see some terrible situations of poverty and disadvantage, which actually are completely and grossly unfair. So the European Union gives us an opportunity to work more efficiently. So if you take the example of medical funding, the European Union puts a considerable amount of money back into the UK for medical funding. I can't remember the exact figure, but it's billions of pounds. And through that money, we're looking at cures for cancer, Alzheimer's, and other diseases that really affect our community. Now, without that money, without being part of that project, how is that research going to be done? And if we're outside of the European Union, how willing is the European Union going to be able to share the benefits with us? Well, they're not, aren't they? If we come out of the European Union, you're going to have a situation whereby France and Germany, that have got elections coming up, they're not going to be positive towards us. They're going to be hostile towards us. They're not going to be saying, well, you've left the club, but we'll still give you all the privileges of being in the club. Because what we're doing is we're opening the door for other countries to leave the European Union. So we're not going to be popular organising these fresh trade agreements. It's not going to be easy.
So you think that Germany and other countries in the European Union are going to turn around, gang up and say, right, you've left us, bye-bye. We're not going to let you have anything.
I think that's a little bit simplistic, but I mean, one of the first questions is there's 1 million Brits living abroad in Europe, currently benefiting from being able to live abroad, being able to claim their pensions, etc. What's going to happen to that group of people? Are they going to be able to claim their pensions, etc., or are they going to be forced back to the UK? So that could happen.
It is a very good question, because this is one of the things that I know that some of the exit campaign have used before, in terms of they quite often seem to target the Eastern Europeans that are over here working, and then saying about sending money back for their children or whatever and so forth, yet without actually mentioning that you can be a pensioner in Spain from the UK, you can be an expat in Spain. I like the way they call it expat as well, not a migrant from the UK. But the interesting bit is that you can be an expat in the UK and actually still claim your winter allowance, I believe, your winter heating allowance.
Okay,
it's a universal benefit, isn't it? Which is why you can still claim it.
Let's move on to immigration then. Is it fair that, let's say, a French person, rather than saying East European, the usual stereotypical person, can come here, work fine, and take benefits?
Is it fair in opposite?
Is it fair that they can take child benefits and working credits?
Is it fair that we also have the liberty to travel and live abroad? It's equal and opposite, isn't it? People can come here and work, and we can go there and work. And most people coming to the UK actually come to the UK to work, or to study. That's the vast majority of people that are coming to the UK from other EU countries, are actually either working, have a job, make a contribution, make a net contribution to the UK economy. There's no doubt about that. I think both sides agree on that. It's something like EU migrants contribute £5 billion a year to the economy, so they're not a drain on the economy.
It depends. There was a House of Lords report that said something slightly different from that one, but overall, let's call it neutral, shall we?
That EU migrants contribute around 5 billion. These things are very difficult to measure, but there is agreement across both sides, actually, that EU migrants are a net benefit to the UK. 10% of our doctors in the NHS are from European Union countries. 4% of our nurses in the NHS are from European countries. You've got to ask yourself what will happen to that 14-15% of workers inside the NHS if all of a sudden Britain becomes a really difficult place to remain into, or the tax system becomes very unfair. Yeah. Because nobody really knows what's going to happen if we go out. But certainly all of those people that come along and prop up our NHS. And let's remember that the NHS is governed by the government. The NHS is actually nothing to do at all with the European Union.
Yeah. I think one of the other things as well is in terms of when I think this is I don't know necessarily about a misconception, but people just aren't really aware of what people can claim, what they can't claim. You get politicians from all sorts of parties saying, oh, they're coming over here and they're just getting our benefits. Now, I do believe that there is a situation that you can't just get a whole load of benefits and everything. You can't just literally walk in here, over here.
Only no, actually, you can. It's only under the new potential regulations that David Cameron actually put in.
Something else, but we'll have a look into that one as well. We are running very short on time now, unfortunately. So thanks very much for some of the EU stuff. I want to go back just very, very quickly to some local stuff as well in Thanet, and because we've got time for one more song before the news as well, and so we literally have 2 minutes here. I'll be honest, I had a little rant a few weeks ago, maybe a couple of months ago now, I don't know whether it was, but I was kind of fed up of the behaviour of what goes on at Thanet District Council in general, not singling any one particular person out, but just in terms of its general behaviour. Thanet District Council has even entered into national news in the past that it's apparently one of the worst councils around, and that don't listen to people. How can this be improved?
Elect more reputable councillors. I think people need to be aware of who they're electing and look very closely at the credentials of the people that they're electing, and actually look at the track record of the parties. I mean, one of the things I will say for Thanet District Council is they have previously, as a result of that bad reputation, taken steps to improve the reputation. They've put training into place, etc. They twinned with another council to do peer review, and that's been really successful. It predates my involvement. I think it is important that people really take ownership of the councillors that they're electing, because it doesn't just bring it. You know, I think I'm an ethical councillor. I think I'm an honest person. I sit as a magistrate. I have a decent full-time job. Where we get poor councillors, it brings the reputation of all of us councillors into question, and that's not a good thing, because at the end of the day, you earn the trust and respect of people by delivering a service to them. It's public service. That's what being a councillor is all about.
And so do you think that some of these councillors just need reminding of that fact?
TDC takes steps to train new councillors, but you've got to recruit the right people in the first place in order to get a return on that investment. People in Thanet deserve good councillors. They deserve them. You know, they deserve hard-working councillors that take problems big and small seriously, that are always contactable, and that are always there to help people out. We run regular surgeries, as I say. Most people actually contact me by phone or email. The other thing that we do is we run employment surgery, so we help people out in a variety of ways.
OK, well, listen, we've got to go, I'm afraid. I'm sorry we've run out of time. Karen, Constantine,
Thank you very much.
for
Thank
coming
you.
in this morning.
Thank you for having me.
Very much appreciate that. We'll see you next Sunday. I'll be on breakfast tomorrow morning. Stand by, Horace is next.
Thanet's only full-time local radio station with music, news and information. Online at academyfmthanet.com and on 107.8. This is Academy FM News.